said, okay, you have worship services on Christmas Day, even though it's not a national holiday here in Japan. But what about Ascension Day on Thursday? On a Thursday. In Germany and perhaps some other countries, I did not check this out, but she said it was a national holiday. To celebrate what? The ascension of Christ into the heavens, to take back his crown as King of kings and Lord of lords. Now, I don't know how many people went to church. She didn't expound on that. But what about Christmas Day if you have worship services? How many people come on that day, the 25th? Our church began to overflow when we were there. Not just on Christmas Eve, but on Christmas Day. Christmas Eve is the best time for doing evangelism in Japan because the Japanese people love Christmas parties or birthday parties. And even, who was it, Colonel Sanders would have a Santa Claus uniform on for Christmas time. Got to get your Kentucky Fried Chicken for Christmas celebrations and all that. Anyway, I got to watch the time here. Like I said, you don't invite a retired missionary to speak because 2 hours later, the roast is shriveled up, so forget it. We'll go out to Kentucky Fried instead. But anyway.
Nobody has a roast in the oven anymore.
They don't?
Not in this
No roast? Nothing in the oven? Oh, you're in trouble. I would come home, okay, before going to Japan, we were in one other mission field. Mission field in eastern North Dakota. Once in a while, I come home from something, and Beth wasn't with us yet, but the other kids would come running to the car and they say, oh, Dad, you're in trouble. Oh, no, now what did I do or what didn't I do? But I was like, he's big trouble. But anyway, so we were on the mission field in eastern North Dakota for 5 years before going to Japan. 35 years in Japan, mandatory retirement. We should have retired in the year 2000. The Japanese church asked us to hang on for another year for special purposes. But anyway, where was I?
Mission field of North Dakota.
Yeah, that was a great 5 years there. But anyway, senior moment. But now to the text. But there's no roast in the oven? Nothing sitting on the oven?
No.
Nothing on the barbecue?
No. More importantly,
You're in trouble again, yes.
more importantly, there's no football today.
That's great. No football today. I think I probably mentioned one time that I was very angry with God because my father stood 6'4", 220 pounds in his stocking feet, and he could carry 100 pounds on one shoulder, 100 pounds on the other shoulder, and go trotting down the field, and I'd be dragging 50 pounds, or was it only 25 pounds? Now I know this is what, Los Angeles Rams territory, but that's tough luck. Because if the Lord God had made me as big as my father, me and the Minnesota Vikings would still be going to the Super Bowl. I better believe that. But he made me short. My mom was only 5 foot, Scotch-Irish, and all that. But anyway, I went to a little school, Augsburg College in Minneapolis, and tried to play some more football. At 127 pounds, you gotta go to a small school. But my life got changed around there. I've been in church even before I was born, in my mother's womb. Every day of my life, every Sunday of my life. But don't ask me what the preacher had to say. Ask the preacher tomorrow what he had to say. But anyway, don't ask me what the preacher had to say, because I was thinking of the boxing match that was coming up, or the game that we blew the night before. Things like that. My love was football and boxing. I made 2 bad mistakes in my boxing career just before getting into the Golden Gloves, so I was eliminated. I fought 2 fights, 2 weight divisions above mine, and I simply say, I thought I won those fights. But the judges and the ref disagreed, and so I thought, hey, you'll be outside and we'll discuss it. But they wouldn't do it. And so I got bad eyes out of it, so had to drop out of all that stuff. But anyway, my life got changed around. A professor from the seminary. It was Augsburg College and Theological Seminary, the old Lutheran Free Church. And the Sem Dean came down and taught lowly freshman basic Bible. And one verse really hit home and it changed my life around. He talked about Paul's, he was an Old Testament man, but it was like a prophet out of the Old Testament. But he made Romans 1:16 come alive. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel, of the power of God for salvation, for the Jews first and also to the Greeks and to all who believe. It's the power of God for salvation. Not ashamed of the gospel. And I had to ask myself, hey, I've been in church every Sunday, but I really don't speak up for Christ, do I? So I rededicated my life to Christ, but it was a twofold call, not just to be a Christian, but to be a missionary as well. All authority has been given unto me in heaven and earth. Go and make disciples of all nations. However, because of playing football at Augsburg and a number of other things, I ended up with a bad back. To make a long story short, I could not go to the mission field. And then I had a spinal fusion, and I simply say that the Lord healed my back through prayer and surgery in a very special way. But we had a very special ministry going on in North Dakota, and it hit me. Look, Lord, the blessings that you were giving us. And maybe it was because our congregation in that place was in the center of a wider circle, and revival was coming through that congregation out to those other areas. And the pastors were coming in for Bible study and prayer time for this revival. But Lord, this is great. But then he said, what was your first call? The mission field. But Lord, look. The mission field. Debbie wrote something once, and I'm going to quote just a couple of lines. But you have to hear the Reverend Mr. Black, sung by the something or other trio. And you have to know the hymn that's in there. You have to walk that lonesome valley. But anyway, two phrases in there. And Jacob wrestled and fought God's design. And like Jacob, he wrestled and fought God's design. And like Moses, he tried line after line. But after landing in the hospital flat on his back, he could hear the Lord say, I told you so, Jack. Then was born the Reverend Singer Sensei when he said, I'll obey. We packed up family and bags and went to Japan. But my first call was to be a missionary, and I fought. Now in the text, I have a couple of other things quickly. You know, you put the gospel stories all together and you kind of try to put the puzzle together, and sometimes it's very difficult. Because the disciples were up in the upper room, and on that first resurrection, the women had gone to the tomb weeping on the way because they didn't realize what Jesus had really said, or they didn't believe it, or they didn't understand it. On the third day, he would be raised up from the dead. And they come to the tomb. Who's going to move the stone from us? And they look up from all the grief. The stone's already moved. And in the different stories, the angel says, why do you look for the living amongst the dead? He's not here. He's risen as he said he would. And they go back to the disciples, and they meet Jesus on the way. We've seen Jesus. He's alive. He's risen. And the disciples, all these poor women, wear them in the little white jackets. We've got to put them in the padded cells. They're illusionary. But Jesus comes to them and he says, peace be with you. Peace. But Thomas wasn't there. Now, I don't know why my folks named me Thomas, doubting Thomas, probably after my father and probably after his father, and it all goes way back to King Alfred the Great in Denmark, because our middle name was Alfred all the way through too. But you know, we had in the church in Japan, in the international church, maybe we were still in the house church, we had a captain of an Indian from India ship that came and visited us and attended our worship service, and he invited us to a ship to have real Indian curry. Oh, great stuff. But he could trace his ancestry all the way back to one who had been baptized by St. Thomas in India. Wow. and they were all Christians all the way, and proud of the name Thomas.